Okay, hello everyone. Today is a new episode. We have a new guest as well. It's Simon Dalley. It's our guest today. Is the founder of GrowTraffic, an award-winning UK SEO and content agency. So once again, welcome, Simon.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me on.
Okay, so today we're going to try to talk a little bit about your experience, because I think you're the most experienced man I ever faced, and definitely we're going to dive a little bit into AI in SEO and how AI is helping or is hurting our ranking and so on. So let's start with your huge experience. How did it start? How did you manage to switch to SEO and all this kind of stuff?
No problem. So I've been working in marketing for about 25 years now. Started off in working for an agency that exclusively worked for the automotive industry. So the clients of that agency were Mercedes-Benz, Isuzu trucks, DAF, Renault, all these massive brands, mainly doing truck things and van things for them. And we managed the database at the time for Mercedes-Benz trucks and vans. So we kept that up to date. And this was very much, we're talking 25 years ago or so. So when, still at the time when things were being sent out in the post. And I remember lots of conversations that no one would ever buy a car online, for example. And all that's changed now. So back then, I previously, actually, while I was at university, I previously had like a little business running a little website, and I had sold things throughout the UK and exported things around Europe primarily. So I'd got a bit of a flavour for how people found things online, but it wasn't until I really started working in marketing, and I started by doing a PR campaign for Isuzu trucks back in 2004, 2005, something like that. And I noticed that the rankings changed when we included links within the PR campaigns. At the time, it was really obvious. And that's really what started my interest in SEO. Prior to that, like I said, I had an old business, so I understood that I could create content and put it live, and people find it and read it, and I knew where to put the keywords and things, but that was the moment that I made the transition into thinking, oh right, there's other things to SEO that need thinking about. So yeah, so that was how I got started in SEO. I then moved and became the brand manager of a company called We Buy Any Car, which is quite a big organization in the UK, big brand. I was the brand manager there, and that was the first time that I started doing PPC. So, you know, the other side of search marketing, doing the paid side of it as well. And that's kind of been the start of my career. I was doing some freelancing for a few years. I did some mystery shopping for some of those automotive manufacturers back in the day. And I decided that I'd wanted to make a new business. I wanted to make a brand for myself. My son was about to be born. He's like 16 going on 17 now. So my son was about to be born. And I just had this thought process that I wanted to develop something that could potentially become an agency in time, or it could give me a client base that I could fall back on if I ever wanted to. Because one of the core things that I saw at that point, I was probably in my mid-20s at this time, and I was looking around all these marketing people and thinking, there's nobody under the age of like 34 that I know in marketing. Where are all the old marketers? And I think part of that was at the time that we were moving into the digital age. So everyone was getting the first website around this time. Or, you know, lots of businesses were getting the first website, or they might be getting the second website. And the first website was completely built out of Flash, or back in the day when Flash was around, that Google couldn't rank and all the rest of it. So people were starting to understand what needed to be done in order to get websites to rank. And so I was very fortunate to kind of be young and hungry and all the rest of it around this time, and things were
But
changing.
in that time, it was pretty interesting because a lot of people that were doing SEO at that time, that was also doing black hat SEO, sometimes even without actually knowing that, because at the time it was pretty normal. Then later on with algorithm changes, when actually Google decided to put algorithm like in a random dates. But what about you? Did you ever started and make some
Yeah,
black hat SEO?
you might want to say that I'm a reformed spammer in some ways. So I've done it all. I've tried everything in my time. So I remember, used to write 5 articles, basically the same thing, and we'd spin them together and get hundreds of articles and place them on different websites, and it would just you couldn't read the things, but those links would make things rank. I've done it. I've done all that. I've done the the commenting on blog posts and all the rest of it, and inserting exact match anchor text within the name on the blog post to get a link back to a page. I've done that, and pretty much everything that you can think about. Sticking invisible text in the footer of a web page. 20 years ago, absolutely, I've done it. I've done it all. I've tried it all.
Yeah.
However, I would say that it was probably about 2009, 10 when I started to kind of move towards the kind of ethical side of things, and focus on being an ethical SEO kind of agency, SEO consultant, if you like. I remember at the time that was when SEO Moz at the time was moving towards that kind of content side of things, content marketing, inbound marketing, as we talked about, I think, back then. And I remember the fallout from Panda and Penguin and all that kind of 2011, 12, all that time. I remember one guy ringing me up in floods of tears because he ranked at position 1 in the UK for a specific term, a money term, basically. Without his business still exists, so I'll be a bit cautious about specifying the term or who it was, but he basically dropped down to the 90s overnight. I think this was about 2012, and like the bottom just fell out of his business, and this was before I'd started. I think he'd been working with another SEO, and they'd done loads of stuff, because I found a lot of stuff. I found like links to gambling sites, porn links, and all the rest of it, things that were pointing back to his website. And yeah, so he was in floods of tears at this time because he just ordered tens of thousands of pounds worth of stock from China at the time, and suddenly had gone from making thousands and thousands of pounds every single day organically to nothing overnight. And at the time it was jumping, it was bouncing around, it was going up from 90 to 20 odd. Sometimes it'd appear in the top 5. It happened, but it always came back down to that kind of that lower 100. I think at one point actually he lost all his search terms apart from his brand. His brand was the only thing that was left, and we, during that time, did quite a bit of recovery work. Talking about disavow files we were putting together at that time, and really trying to save people from the stuff that had been done previously. And like I say, at the time, probably a few years before that, I'd done some things as well. So I'm part of the problem. I'm a reformed spammer.
What is interesting in those days is the algorithm updates that we mentioned earlier. They really had good names, like Panda, like Penguin, and so on. They really had good names comparing to now, which is version 2 of April, 12 days of ongoing update and so on. But let's talk a little bit about the algorithm changes during this period, especially on SEO. So
Yep.
What do you think? How do you compare these kind of the first stages when Google used to put 1 to 3 updates per year compared to now that sometimes they put 3, 4 updates in a month?
Well, I think that they always did a lot of updates in the background. The difference was they didn't tell us about it back then. So if you think about the Panda update, yeah, it's a great name, but there was a guy in Google called Panda. It didn't just come out of the blue. It was SEOs that often gave the updates their names. Some updates came from Google, and we learned what the names were internally. So like the Vince update, the Vince update, and I think that was about 2010, and that's when they made branding important in the algorithm. But up until recently, or I suppose it's not recent anymore. It's the last 10 years or so, I suppose, but it's that recent. They've really let us know what they've been doing, giving us a bit more of an understanding about the things that they're looking for and working on. So there's a lot more transparency, which I think is good, because you don't have a character like Matt Cutts on the scene anymore, who is an engineer at Google, who in those days was regularly kind of batting off the all the speculation about the things that have been done. And also, if you look at things like the ranking heat trackers that are out there now, we know when Google's done something in a way that we didn't back in those days. It was much more speculative. So Google almost can't deny it. They have to come out and say, this is what we've done, this is why, this is what's going to happen, and go from there. So in some ways, I think it's great. In some ways, it's a shame, because that was something that made the industry exciting at the time.
Yeah, it's still exciting when because you never know what's going to happen the next day, which is not a good excitement that you want to hear about or feel. But if you're, let's say, we mentioned branding, and I'm curious to know your thoughts on, domain rating. So do you think, because everybody was obsessed in domain rating, but we still measure the domain rating as well using different tools. So how obsessed we should be right now while we speak?
So obviously PageRank back in the day was what made Google important and different, and what made the algorithm work. Fundamentally, the way it ranked the domains was incredibly important. So when Moz came out with the DA score, they reverse engineered the PageRank to try and work it out. That was a big milestone for SEOs, I think, because we started to understand it a bit more, and we had numbers that weren't just 1 to 10, which is what we got on the PageRank, on the bars at the time. But I think it's been a long time since I have obsessed over domain authority, domain trust, domain rankings, all the different kind of terminology that we use. It's still an important metric, don't get me wrong. It's still one that we absolutely look at. But I would be only looking at that when I'm doing some kind of gap analysis, when I'm doing some kind of backlink gap analysis. I would consider the overall domain ranking, the domain authority, domain trust, all these different metrics when I'm thinking about how to pass the link equity around the website. And not like we used to do previously, where we had like no follows on different links to try and do the link G sculpting and all that type of stuff that we did back in the day. But yeah, it's still important, especially when you're thinking about backlinking and you're trying to do it a bit more strategically. Page authority is probably the more important metric when you're really trying to get a service page to rank, which tends to be the way that I do backlinking these days, or we do, should I say. I do mainly brand links, brand anchor text links back to a homepage, build the domain authority, and then internally have a much more strategic approach to the different service pages.
And how do you think it's best way to increase page rating? Not only the domain rating, which is the homepage, but actually those specific pages that we want to push authority, because this is where it tends to be more hard in a way to somehow rank that specific page.
Absolutely. So the first thing that I would say is always start with the internal links. That's the place to start first and foremost. Think about the internal link structure, the link architecture that you've got going there. You want to make sure that the most important pages feature on the top navigation, and I always put them on the bottom navigation as well, a big chunky footer navigation section. Make sure that it's featured in the content throughout the website. If it's your most important page, it's got to be linked in the content from the homepage as well. So you're doing the kind of link sculpting in that respect, but you're not using different attribute tags that you might put on the links. So that would be the first place to start. Then I would probably do some kind of gap analysis where I would say, we want to rank for a keyword or a group of keywords. This is what the top 10, 20 ranking positions look like. And these are the pages that rank, and this is the page authority for these different pages. So I'd put that in a table. I'd have the page that I want to rank at the bottom, and then I'd work out the gap between them. So, say all of them are 30, for example, and mine's 15, then I know where I've got to get to. Similarly, with the number of links, internal links, inbound links, the domain authority, the page authority from those links as well. Put them all together, work out your gap, and that tells you what type of websites you need to go after. And then you go one step further. What percentage of those are do follows versus no follows, and that gives you a strategic target for those as well. And if you want to go a bit further again, then you'd look at things like the anchor text. You do some anchor text gap analysis, and you'd say what percentage of the anchor text are exact match versus things like read more, click here, etc., versus brand. And or even the URL, and you just work your way through, figure out the gaps, and then you've got a target. So then you set your target, you go after it, you get those links, and then give it a few weeks, reassess where the rankings are, and then at some point you're going to say this worked or it didn't work. If it didn't work, what are we going to do about it? And that's strategic backlink analysis. You might also think about what content is actually on that page. From a content perspective, you might be saying, well, we need to make sure that page has some kind of content that can be downloaded, something that adds additional credibility. So one of the things that I get asked all the time, can we put a piece of content on your blog page? And I'm always like, yeah, sure, you can, but these are the rules. It's got to be a certain length. It's got to be unique. It's got to be human written. And if you want me to link out, the page that it lands on has to be a page that adds additional context to the copy on the page that we're linking out from. So it's got to go into it in more detail. And ordinarily, that's never going to be a homepage. That's always going to be a service page or an informational page. So make sure that you're including some of the
location pages and so on,
or a location page. Yeah, absolutely. And it's about including some of that content that's much more specific in those pages so that it justifies the link.
Okay. But you mentioned in between somehow the local SEO as well in GMB or Google Business Profile, and what's the impact as these days? Because I personally said that citations are back because they were wiped from the face of earth. And then now when LMS came, it's somehow they also came back, like returning from the dead. So let's talk how local SEO can help the overall SEO, to improve overall ranking, also to end up in LMS like ChatGPT, Gemini, and all the others that are.
Absolutely. So I think local SEO is so important for a lot of local businesses. It stands to reason. If you're a local business, then you're going to want to make sure that your Google business profile is up to date, as a service is all in the right place, that you are ensuring that your customers are reviewing you. And I always like to help customers review, so give them some indications of what they should include in, make sure that they are including the area or different parts of the area that you might service within the reviews that they write for you. So that, you've got the posts as well now to use and get out there. So there's loads of opportunity there. In terms of citations, vital, isn't it? You look at NAP, you've got to make sure that, in fact, we've got a client at the moment who's having a bit of trouble with their Google business profile. So their name includes the location that they're based. However, so their company name includes the location plus limited at the end. Their the Google business profile just included their name, their brand name, and the location, but without the limited. And everywhere else on the internet, they're referred to just by the brand name. And so recently, Google has decided that they are violating policies because it's not consistent across the web. And now we are picking back through all of the different places that they're cited and that they are referenced in order to increase the consistency across there. So it's just something that we're working through at the moment. Local directories, all the different places that you'd normally expect them to be. But yeah, it's tricky to let a client know that they've used up all their appeals, they've tried, and it's hard work because we're having to have the conversation.
What about, I think personally we tested before, if a GMB got suspended, we try to do some local ads using PPC. One you mentioned is somehow to trigger Google that we are legit and we have a verified account for PPC. And now please verify an account. So do you think there's any correlation here and any kind of cooperation in between Google Ads and let's say Google Business Profile, in order they can find out that something in between has happened and this is the real one that got suspended earlier?
Yeah, I completely agree. So all of the different search orientated products that Google have all contribute. I firmly believe that they all talk to each other in some different way, and they all add to ranking factors or policy violation mechanisms, because it's all automated. There's so many hundreds and hundreds of billions of websites out there that Google couldn't do anything to look after the whole internet manually. So yeah, I think that's a good point actually. Using something like Google Ads, perhaps using Google Merchant Center as well, and trying to integrate the two things. Maybe even triggering the ads through Merchant Center rather than just on Google Ads might be an option, just to try and get it going again. There's a number of different ways of doing it, but it's still frustrating for a client when you have to say to them, look, we've got a hypothesis. We think we know why this has happened, but we don't fully know why it's happened. So we're going to have to try X, 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 and X just to see if that works. And it'll take a little bit of time and then we'll find out. So yeah. You're always going to get that though. That's SEO.
Exactly. That's SEO. That's what makes it incredibly hard to do SEO, because you never know 100%. You have to experiment, test, and do the reverse engineering, so on.
Yeah.
But what do you think about AI in these days? Because a lot of people say, okay, now SEO is dead. Even Google changed a lot of algorithm. Now the crucial one, I think, some of the experienced SEO experts are saying, yeah, this is one of the greatest in last 20 years. The prompt in AI overview that you can also communicate and go back and forth. It's not only ranking for a keyword, it's ranking for content. How this will affect the SEO jobs and experts, and also to provide good work for the clients.
I think it's brilliant. I love it. I love SEO. I love AI. I love the way it's integrated with search. I think it's great. I think it's another string to our bow. It's another thing that we're doing. And I've funnily enough, I was saying this just this morning, that we've been at the forefront of the AI industry for quite a long time anyway, because Google's been running essentially an AI system for many years. A fundamental part of the way that Google understands the internet is machine learning. It's AI. It's been all these things for a long time now. So I think we're quite fortunate if we understand the way that these things work, or think we do. Then we've got a chance, a good chance of understanding the way that AI ranks things and the way it thinks about things. But the internet and the way that people find things is absolutely changing. It's not about traffic anymore. It's about answers and understanding. And as SEOs, we have to change the way we think about it. And, our company's called GrowTraffic. and these days,
they just want to grow traffic in all the channels.
Yeah. And GrowTraffic made a lot of sense, 15 years ago, 17 years ago, whatever it was when I set it up. So, but these days you want to grow answers, you want to grow understanding, you want to provide knowledge, and you need to understand that not all that traffic that you're servicing is going to get to your website. But that's been happening for a long time. We put content on social media and we build people's presences on platforms that are outside the website. So I think it can only be a great thing. And I look at the trends that Google reported for the first quarter of this year, the amount of money that they've made through search, which has grown, I think by something like 60 billion, or might have even grown by 60 billion. But it's a lot of money, one way or another. It makes me think that we're still okay. We're still going in the right direction. People still need answers. If and when the AI companies figure out how they're going to monetize what they're doing, they need to keep publishers, as they'll probably think of businesses, they need to keep them on side, because they're going to want money from them to pay for their services. And I actually look at Meta and what Meta's doing at the moment with AI, and think that they might. It's not very front facing. They're all about using AI to increase their revenue, and I think we might be looking a bit more at what they're doing in the coming months as well.
Yeah, they also have integrated AI in ads and this kind of stuff. But I just read it yesterday, I think, from SEMrush in the social, that how SEO has moved beyond your website. They mentioned when only website matters, then the rank higher, more visibility, backlinks, up to Reddit AI and visibility and stuff. So do you think that's correct in a way? And why Reddit is I never used Reddit. I never was a fan. I tried to experiment a little bit, but it was never my thing. I never couldn't do a decent post that got approved and stayed there.
So I've always tried to use Reddit to promote content. I've been using it for 10, 15 years, whatever. You'll find me on there. If you have a look for, I think I'm under Dalley or something like that. But yeah, I don't have a massive karma score or anything. I think it's about 10,000. However, I've always used it to promote the content that we've been putting out there, because it's just an extra link, isn't it? It's a way of getting a link back to a blog post, or a service page, whatever. I've set up various little groups and subreddits that I've either set up and handed over to other people over the years and done things like that. So, and being admins and no longer admins of some, of others. So I think Reddit is really valuable, and it's a place where people go and they talk and they share content, which is why I understand that the LLMs find it really valuable as a place to understand how people talk and how they value things. So I'm back on, actually. I'm back trying to use it a bit more. It's kind of dropped out of my flow, but my kind of the way that I work. So I need to just kind of focus on it a little bit to make it part of my everyday working life. But I do think it's important. I remember when Google used, similar to when Google used to surface Twitter posts in the search results, and we all made sure that we were always linking a new piece of content or a page via a Twitter post to make sure that, to help that rank. So it's all a kind of similar thought process, I think. So yeah, so I do think Reddit's valuable, and I think that in terms of the way that AIs are considering the internet, I think that if you've been doing SEO for the last 10 years, specifically, since that kind of time period, you're already thinking in terms of authority, expertise, demonstrating trust, and all the kind of those EAT principles. And you should already be thinking about things in terms of entities as well. So you understand how things relate to each other. You should kind of understand the basic principles of the prediction engine that is an AI platform. But yeah, I'm super excited about AI.
But the only thing about Reddit, because we talk a little bit more about Reddit, so the only thing, they don't accept a lot of marketing. Actually, they have zero tolerance in marketing language. So that's what makes it hard, I think, to use Reddit and give an opinion about specific stuff, because it's also hard to just mention something without mention why it's good, why it's bad, and this kind of stuff.
So my rule was always one post is marketing, as in I'm going to promote a piece of content and probably do it in a non-marketing way. And then I have to surface like up to 10 different pieces of content that I'm going to share as well. So I think that you've got to be a really active member of the community one way or another in order to actually use it properly. Otherwise you risk being shadow banned and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so I used to work for a company in the construction industry a long time ago, and I used to love it because I used to get up early and find all the architecture / kind of construction news from the night before, often the day before. It's not been picked up by any of the big kind of publications, but it was sat there in the it was sat there in the specialist construction news press or in the architecture publications. And I'd generally be like getting up there at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, putting this content, putting a blog post onto a website and then sharing it on Reddit. And it'd be the first time that news story got out to a mass audience. And therefore it was getting those links, it was getting the points, it was getting people commenting on them. And you often found that you were the one informing the national publications in some of these articles. So that was a strategy that I had about 12 years ago, put it that way.
Is it? I'm waiting for those when that time will come that Reddit will go away, or at least will fade away a little bit, because it's for most of SEO experts it's very hard to somehow stay consistent enough there, because as you said, you need to create a brand there, but then creating a brand, most of us, they don't stay there. It's, I think I see a lot of people that are either people that had a lot of time and stay a lot, or if they do have a job, full-time job, or even a business, it's hard to set up the rules that Reddit has. But do you think it will eventually start to fade away?
I mean, all things end. Everything ends. But, this too shall pass. It all comes to an end at some point. It's been going for a long time. It's got a very active community. I completely agree, actually. One of the things that you just said really resonated with me, that I do see people in there that they can't work. They can't do anything else. They must just be watching the TV and commenting on Reddit. And they're often a bit contrarian when they first put something up. You can win them round, just keep talking to them. And often they come good in the end. But it is a funny little community. I mean, it's a forum, ultimately.
Yeah, very
Back
important.
in the day, there was forums everywhere. Now there's not very many of them. Well, not they don't rank in the same way. It's the principal forum of the internet, I suppose, in many ways. But then you could say the same thing about Wikipedia. Does Wikipedia go away? I could see a day when websites go away. In general, I could see a day when you go onto an AI platform and it knows you incredibly well. It knows the industry that you're in. It knows the products that you're after, and it knows your inclinations, the way that you use the internet, the way that you use a browser, and just spins up a website for you, and it sucks in product, services, puts it all on one page. This is what you want, and you've got a perfect user interface. There's absolutely no need to go to any other website. I can see that happening one day. I don't know what the internet looks like in that day.
But you mentioned Wikipedia. What about Wikipedia? It's much more powerful than ever, I would say. It's extremely hard to create a post there these days.
Yeah. I still contribute to Wikipedia. As a I still edit posts and do all the rest of it. I have been paying Wikipedia £2 a month for the best part of 20 years, which should probably give you an indicator. £2 a month was probably a lot more back when I started than it's worth now. But yeah, I think it's a really valuable asset for humanity as much as anything else. It's the sum total of human knowledge can be, it's crowdsourced, it can be edited, and
the problem is that if you have stayed a little bit longer, it's okay. But if you want to if you're working for a client that client to have a Wikipedia page, this is when it gets interesting and has a lot of criteria that a journalist will read it, and the possible chances that it will remove are high. So
yeah, I mean, I've had numerous pages. I've put numerous pages live. I've had numerous pages taken down. There's still pages.
What's the secret of putting a page live? Not only on draft, but put it live so people can actually access it, and also LMS, because LMS as well are very obsessed with Wikipedia these days.
I mean, it's putting the references in, the citations, making sure that it comes from really credible sources. And also, I think sometimes it's just getting a good moderator on there who is on your side. It's a business page is difficult, without a doubt. There has to be a really valid reason for a business to be listed on Wikipedia, and most businesses don't meet the criteria, and that's the reality. You're not going to get around that. A lot of businesses don't meet the criteria for the kind of credibility that they require to be on Wikipedia. So the thing that you've got to then do is well, if you don't have the credibility to have a Wikipedia page in your own right, what's the next best thing? Which is then, how do we reference our website or a news article that we've been featured in? How do we make sure that we've got something that adds context and additional information for a Wikipedia page that makes it valid to be referenced? And yeah, I've got plenty of posts referenced all over Wikipedia. It's one of the first things I try and go to.
Can we use backlinks for reference for Wikipedia?
Yeah. So I will often cite a client, cite a blog post. I'm often write the blog post for a client with the Wikipedia page in mind, and then I will link back to them as a publisher. It depends on the page. You know, if you're talking about a page that is highly active, as in people are there often changing things, then you'll find that your reference will probably get removed at some point if you're just linking back to Joe Blogg's website. However, I look at this. I can think of like the building that I'm in now. So this is an old church that we bought. We're turning it into a business center. It previously had its own Wikipedia page. So if you look on that Wikipedia page, you'll find that there's links to...
I think that's pretty good news, and everybody would be interested and intrigued to put that, because you mentioned we need to talk a little bit more about how you converted the church into the data center, right? And actually that's... everybody would be happy to have something like that, because that's the exact place people are talking about that. It's not something that happens every day. Let's have numerous of reasons, I think, for that. But if you have a random business, this is when it gets really, really hard. So, but also, tell us a little bit more about how you managed to convert the church into the data center. Are people interested in using it more? And is it beneficial for the local area as well?
Well, I hope so. I had this idea. So I used to work for a company called Skiddle.com. They're a primary ticket outlet for events in the UK, and they worked in the old waterboards. The waterboard is like the council-run water works company that manages the water in the area. They worked in this old office called the Watermark. At the time, it was the waterboard's office, and it had been converted into a creative hub. Digital hub, creative hub. So there was loads of creative businesses in there. Everyone was bouncing off each other. It was brilliant. And I always thought, one day I'll build something similar, and I'll have some kind of building with lots of different businesses in, and we'll create this digitally focused structure. And so we were in an office at the time. And the office was only about 6 miles away from our house, but it was over the moors, and it was always a bit of a pain to get to. And I was thinking, we need to buy something a bit more locally. So I started looking for an old pub or a nursing home or an old hotel, something with multiple small rooms with its own car park, that type of thing. And literally round the corner from our house, there was a church, this church, that had been for sale for a good few years by this point, had multiple failed bids on it, with people coming up with a plan, because this is an old Church of England church. So in England, the church is is established. So there's lots of statutory legislation about how a Church of England church has to be disposed of.
Yeah,
so you have to,
right. You have strict rules.
So you have to go through first the parishioners, the people that used to use the church. Then you have to go through the local council. Then you have to get it accepted by the church. You have to go to the diocese and the archdiocese and the commissioners and all. It's a big process. Even English Heritage, because it's a listed building, have to all sign it off before you do that. It took about 3 years to buy it. And then once you do that, that's the easy bit. And you've got to start converting it. So, we've got, I don't know, rooms where I'm looking to my side now, and there's a wall here, a feature wall that's made out the back of pews, for example, that have been taken out the main body. And you've got to work out how to heat it without bankrupting yourself, and you've got to build all these different rooms and then start to encourage different digital businesses to come in and use it. And that, to begin with, is probably people who want to do podcasting, it was people that wanted to take photographs in here and use the photography studio. But moving on, now we have I've got another meeting this week with a new prospect who wants to come in, and they produce the software for lots of gambling companies, actually. So a lot of like the big UK gambling companies, they produce some software for those. So they're quite a big team, quite an interesting techie business. It'd be great to see them. If they do take the office that we think they're going to. So we'll see what happens there.
Yeah, that sounds very interesting as for us and for news as well. But also, if you keep doing SEO, you definitely need faith. So you cannot completely escape from faith. Sometimes it's all about trust and faith that this algorithm won't hit us, and hopefully everything goes well. Yeah, so good luck on this new kind of achievement with data center and so on. One of the last question I would have is, since you work a lot with local business as well, what are the biggest local SEO mistakes that you see that the businesses make before they talk to you or talk to someone similar that they actually do have an agency? So what are these mistakes that you like often see?
Well, so probably one of the biggest ones is creating multiple Google business profiles. Or just having that mess in, they've created this at this point, they've moved house, so their personal address has changed, and the personal address was always the business address, but now they've moved personal address, but not only moved personal address, now the business is in a unit, so they've got all these different addresses for the business all over the internet, different phone numbers over time. They might have changed their domain. They've got their emails don't work. They've never gone back through their history and said, right, we'll tidy this up. We'll make sure that this place that previously talked about the address that we don't live in anymore now references the unit, not our personal address, the unit that we work out of. It's those type of problems that I see. And that's before you even start getting clever and start thinking about metadata and images and all the rest of it, all the cleverer stuff. It's very basic things. Being able to be able to actually control the listing. Countless people have come to me and said, well, yeah, I set it up years ago. I can't remember which Google account I had previously, or it's been set up by a developer that built my website and I don't know who he is anymore. I've lost contact with him. All that type of stuff, it happens still. And it just causes problems that can go on for months and years if you don't watch it.
And what about those businesses that already have, GMB verified, but they lack reviews? How to outrank those competitors that have bigger reviews? I mean, bigger in a quantity level.
Yeah, so I think that you can be strategic about it. You can say, ultimately, you're always going to need to get your customers to review you. You need to ask them. You need to get reviews back to you. Like I said before, I like to encourage. I like to have a bit of a script that I can present to somebody and say, perhaps write it like this. Perhaps think about including these words within it, if that's okay. And sometimes I've done it before where I've even been in a room with a group of maybe networking or something like that, where I've said, turn to the person next to you and review their business now, because you're helping them. It's a massive help. And that's what we're all doing. Like, if we're doing local networking, I encourage people to do that. But absolutely stick the reviews on. Make sure that you're getting the reviews into your Google listing, but also putting them things like Trustpilot, Facebook. There's places that you need, because it's going to aggregate all those reviews together at some point. So you need to make sure all these additional signals are going to be useful for Google.
Yeah, that actually makes sense. Okay, my final question would be regarding to entrepreneurship and SEO agency, more or less. So, and I ask every one of my guests, when you should fire clients?
When you should fire clients? It's a great question, because you only know that you should have fired a client after the fact. You very rarely do you think
before it happens. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, very rarely, before you've had a fallout, that you should have actually either not taken them on or let them go sooner. During COVID, after COVID, we said yes to everyone. So we were rebuilding the business, regrowing it. We said yes to everyone, even the people that we knew weren't quite right for us at the time. Or we thought these guys are just going to be a pain, but we're rebuilding, need to bring the money in, we'll just give them the best service we can. And every single one of those has turned into a nightmare. So the reality is that you have a gut feeling before you take them on. And I used to always say that if we get that gut feeling beforehand, we add what I call the arsehole tax. As in, we know that they're going to be a bit difficult, so we'll charge them a little bit more, because we know that's going to happen. And hopefully some of them will go their own way. It'll be enough to put them off. And some of them will say, yeah, all right. And we'll think, well, we've got a bit more money on it, so it's okay. We're going to put up with it. But actually, I think that's a false economy these days. I think that if you know they're going to be a pain, if you know they're going to be difficult, it's not worth it.
Don't ignore the facts.
And you only find that out over time. I've got a client actually at the moment that I wasn't convinced about, took them on before Christmas, and their web developer rang me up on the QT and said, have you ever worked with these before, because they're quite difficult. and that should have been the warning sign.
Warning light.
And something that should have taken 2 months is still being worked on 6 months later.
Yeah. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it was Simon Dalley on this show. So once again, thank you very much for this valuable information. I know that's going to be very information for a lot of people that are going to listen. So once again, thank you very much, Simon.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great. Thank you.